And before the event, I want to advertise our upcoming course, which is called the Basics of Blockchain Technology, and it is my own translation. So, 区块链基础教育课程. So the lecturers are from the experts in Taipei Ethereum meetup. So if you are interested, you can check out the link here. Taipei Ethereum.kktics.cc. Yeah. And for the meetup today, it's our pleasure that we have Adrian Lee. He's from Truffle Suite, and it is the world famous contract development tool. And Adrian will talk about how to make the Web3 development easier. So let's welcome Adrian.
Hi. So I'm Adrian. I work in Truffle. How many people have used Truffle? OK， 其实蛮多的。好，那就因为我中文说的不太好，所以我就用英文，应该大概 OK 吧。好，那就好。This title of this talk is bringing Web3 to Web2, right? And then so we'll try to see what that's about as we go on. So who am I, right? I'm the lead front-end engineer at Truffle, and I am Canadian. That's where I grew up, and I'm based in Tokyo right now. I've been working with Ethereum since 2015, and I'm very passionate about making Web3 easier to build on because right now it's still very difficult to make a dApp or build things on top of Ethereum compared to you can make a website very easily, right? So let's very quickly look at some statistics, right? Because we want to talk about Web3 and Web2 and how that really compares. So we look on GitHub, across the top languages of all time, we find that JavaScript is consistently at the top, right? And so this is interesting. I wonder why that is, right? We also see the top topics tags is actually React, Android, Node.js, and Docker. These two, 1 and 3, are both JavaScript ecosystems, right? I propose one of the conclusions that we can think about here is that most active developers are actually web developers because Web 2.0 is such a big part of our lives. It's really, not surprising that most people who are coding are people who are coding for the web, and specifically Web 2, right? So we have to think about how we can make it easier for Web 2 people to build on Web 3, because otherwise it's going to be, we're leaving a whole market that's untapped, right? So building on Web 3 should be easy, and I think in one day it will be easy, but it's not yet, right? And I'm sure a lot of you agree that it's still very difficult compared to Web 2, right? So here are some problems that I think we have to cover when we talk about the difficulties with building on Web 3. And one of these things is Web3.js, right? How many people have had issues using Web3.js? Basically the same number of people that were using Truffle, and probably everyone who's ever tried to use it, right? Well, the issue with Web3.js is that right now it's unstable versioning, right? Beta 37 and beta 55 has breaking changes, right? There's no usage of semantic versioning, and obviously Web3.js is maintained by the Ethereum Foundation, and we're having talks with them about how we can clean this up and make it better. So there is a plan to fix this and follow semantic versioning, but I don't know when. I wanted it to happen a lot sooner, but I'm not in charge of that, right? So, maybe you should tell them on the GitHub issues and try to give them some pressure to do that. Unstable specs. So, like provider API, right? If you use a MetaMask provider, it's going to be right now there's like Ethereum.enable to enable accounts and things like that. But if there are other providers, like maybe in a Mist browser or like Coinbase Wallet or some of these other dApp browsers, it can be completely different because there's no stable API for a provider. right? But provider, if you don't know what it is, it's the bridge that connects your browser to the blockchain. So if your bridge is broken, then how can you communicate with the blockchain, right? This is supposed to be very important. Imagine if the internet didn't have TCP/IP, or like it just works half the time. It's a terrible experience, right? Complicated tooling, which includes truffle sometimes, right? Because there's truffle contracts and things like that. And then there are certain APIs that are kind of weird and outdated. I mean, the list is very long for me to talk about, but there's still a lot of work that we need to do at Truffle and other frameworks as well to make it actually easier and as easy as the normal JavaScript ecosystem, the Web2 JavaScript ecosystem, which is a lot more mature. And complex UX for end users, like signing up and logging in, right? If you're a non-technical person, how are you you're used to entering your email and password, right? If the first thing that you see is like, okay, here's a mnemonic, here's a private key and a public key, and then I just have no idea what I have to do, right? It's something that we need to solve, how to make the UX better for our users. So what's the community doing about it, right? Well, actually, the community is doing a lot. We can look at some of the EIPs that improve the experience for developers and end users alike. So the first one is universal login, and also, of course, there are Ethereum Foundation grants that help fund this. Universal login makes it so that people can just log in traditionally and not have to deal with mnemonics or private keys until maybe a few more steps down the road, right? Like if you look at, there's the EIP for this, and then there's a discussion there. I encourage you to take a look. But basically, the whole concept is that you will, I mean, it's kind of centralized, it's kind of unavoidable, but basically you're granted tokens the moment that you sign up, and then you can actually do stuff with it. And then later on, it's up to you to save those keys and then have the actual private keys saved in your own wallet. But I mean, it's an onboarding tool, right? So even if it's not fully decentralized, hey, like it's still better than what we have currently, which is completely not decentralized. Opted account exposure. So that's something that we didn't have before. This allows us to question whether or not the accounts are exposed, and there are security concerns about, like, if you use MetaMask, what are these? Who gets to see my account information? Because that's getting more and more sensitive. The more things that you do, the more dApps there are, especially with DeFi, right? Decentralized finance. Like I actually sent I sent some DAI to my friend, and then I could basically take his address, and then I just saw his CDP and how leveraged he was. I'm like, hey, bro, it's kind of dangerous. You gotta add more. You gotta stake more ETH in there. So that's that kind of stuff. It's kind of creepy. Provider API, like I was talking about before, we actually have a group of people like from MetaMask and other companies. We're all, and these are public discussions as well on a Discord chat. We talk about the API for EIP 1193, so that the bridge is standardized. Right? The bridge from Web2 to Web3, the bridge from the browser to the blockchain is standardized, and then we can finally create apps that work. Right? Otherwise, right now things just kind of break for no reason. Like for example, when Web3 had the versioning issue, right, with beta 37, beta 55, all you need to do is have someone npm install, and then it's a different version, and everything breaks, right? We can't have that. Otherwise, people are not going to take us seriously, right? People make fun of crypto all the time anyway. So what's Truffle doing about it? Well, Truffle is we're trying to do a bit more community outreach now. I think before we didn't have so much of like meetups and like people like me going to conferences and talks and things like that. I think it's important to know that you can come and talk to us anytime, and we want to get your feedback. Tell us what things you hate and what we can do to make it better. So here's some pictures at Con. This is where I met some of these guys from the Ethereum Foundation that invited me here today. ETHCon Korea was just last month, so a lot of good things going on there. And then sometimes we have consensus panel events as well. So Truffle was part of Consensus, but we spun out recently, but we still maintain very much close ties with them. In terms of tooling, so with tooling, we have on the front end, we have Truffle itself, we have Ganache with the test blockchain, and then we have on the front end Drizzle and Drizzle utils, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about here. Going back to something that's really important, I feel, for it's not only just programming, but I think in general, people understand what they can see. If a programmer cannot see what a program is doing, then you can't understand it, right? Because you know, the reason why people are afraid of the command line, like normal people, like not like, you know, people who are comfortable with it, right? They're afraid of it because it's all black. Like there's no visibility. What's happening? What's the state behind things? Like you gotta hit ls every time to see like the file system, right? If something changes, you don't know. It's a one-off kind of thing. So this quote is from Brett Victor. I highly recommend people read more about his stuff. He talks about the UX of programming. He used to be, he used to design programming related. Like he was like head of like tech design or something at Apple for a few years. So definitely a very smart guy. So what are some things that we want to see when we develop apps, right? When we want to make, well, even just like regular apps, what are certain things that we want to see? Well, this is the part where it gets a little bit more technical. We want to be able to get certain values, right? So it's like you have your getters and setters inside your contracts. And so there are constant method calls that don't cost any money, and we always need to fetch that data. And I'll give you an example for this in a second. The other thing is contract events. So, you know, in your Solidity contract, we have contract events, right? We need to make it easy so that we can watch for these events and react with it. And also, finally, contract state, which is like everything about the contract, like what are the variables on the contract, what's happening, right? So, let's skip a slide though. So Drizzle Utils is a new set of libraries, still very beta. It uses RxJS streams to live stream your contract state. How many people here have used or heard of RxJS? Not that many. What about stream-based programming, observables? Yeah, functional programming. Okay, that's good. That's good. So if you think about it, it's like functional programming across time rather than across. I mean, it's like having that. Think about things in terms of pipes, right? This event comes in, and something happens later on down the road. We'll get into some examples, so don't worry. I highly recommend you looking into RxJS in general. It's a really interesting programming paradigm. So here, it's a little dark, can you see? Well, it's a very basic contract. I mean, the important stuff is in white anyway. So we have a very simple smart contract here. We have the uint of count, that's one variable that holds a number. Thank you. And then there's an update event. And whenever someone calls the increment function, the count goes up by 1, and then an update event is emitted. And there's also a get count function to get the count, right? So this is all very probably the most simple like CRUD app that you can make with a smart contract. So we'll go. With Drizzle Utils, what you need to do is you initialize it with your own Web3, right? So that gets past the problem of weird Web3 versions, right? Because if you pass in a Web3 that's beta 37, then it'll be fine, right? Even if like they do some weird stuff with later versions. And then traditionally, when you want to get that method called get count, you would have this one-off call, right? My contract.methods.count call, but the value can change every time there's a new block, right? So how can you get that information and listen to it like a stream? So what we have with Drizzle Utils, we can actually take this first part here, because nothing happens until you call .call, right? We can take that first chunk, save it as in the get count method variable. We pass this into the Drizzle Utils create call stream. So this is a convention. When you see the $, we just read stream. Okay, so this is Drizzle Utils.create call stream, and you pass in the method that you want us to call every block, basically. Yeah. So what this creates is a variable called count stream. And with count stream, you can just subscribe to it and update your state, right? So you don't have to think about polling yourself. You don't have to think about, set an interval and then you get the count and whatever. You just use this, create the stream variable, and you subscribe to it, and that's it, right? The reason why I say I really like using streams is that it does something where I like to call it abstracts across the concept of time itself, right? There's no need for you to worry about time. It's just whenever there's a new count, you update the state. That's all it is, right? And then event stream. So, for example, before we would do get past events, and then you get a whole bunch of events between a block that you're interested in or another block. But this particular is a one-off type of thing. There is a subscription API on Web3.js that allows you to subscribe, but it's kind of weird because first of all, it requires you to pass in a WebSocket provider, so your provider may or may not support it, and then your dApp might break depending on what dApp browser people are using. So Get Past Events is the only one that works with all the other providers. So that's traditionally one-off. With Drizzle Utils, you just create event stream, pass in your truffle artifact, right? And then you're going to be able to subscribe to that event. Now, this is an example of RxJS streams, right? Because we can actually pipe it through a filter to filter for the event that we're interested in, which is the update event. So this is very simple example of how we pipe streams, but you can do more complex things, right? Here we're just filtering, but you can pipe it through a map. You can do higher order observables where you return observables, you can flat map over it, right? So you can actually, in this particular example, you can have an event and make API calls based on that event, and then have that follow through to the stream and do more stuff with that, right? So you can have very interesting, complex flows that way. But of course, simple things like this is also extremely valuable, right? Contract balance stream, sometimes this is just like a fun utility, right? So sometimes you just need to create, you want to create something on your dApp that shows the current balance, right? So you can just do this and create a stream of balances, and every time balance changes, you update your state. That's it, right? So here is this is actually an animated GIF, but it's an example of that smart contract that we saw earlier, right? There's an increment button on this mini dApp. Every time someone hits the button, this is obviously sped up. It's insta-mined, right? Usually on the blockchain, it's going to take 20, 30 seconds. Every time someone hits the increment, a method is called to increment the number on the blockchain, right? And then all this stuff here on the right this is the contract state, this is the events. You can see the cam itself updates, and that's actually what we had from before, where we create a method call stream. So every new block, it's making that call. With the contract state, I'm actually missing a slide here, but contract state decoder is something that we created for our own debugger. So we actually have a truffle debugger that allows you to debug the state of contract. What this does is that it can actually grab all of the variables on your contract and tell you the type and stuff like that. And notice if you go all the way back to here, it's not a public uint, right? It's just a regular uint variable in the contract. So technically, you think it would be so hard to get that value, right? Unless you call get count yourself. But what if there's no get count function there, right? How can you get the state? Well, with the state decoder, we can drop the whole thing here, update events, populate, and all of this is live stream, right? There's no polling logic at all. And then you saw that with the pattern we had from before, a lot of it is just you create the stream and you listen to it, and that's it, right? So all of the code here, if we don't talk about the UI code, it's actually just 10 lines, right? All of this logic. And if you do that right now today without this kind of stream-based approach, I guarantee you it would take much longer than 10 lines. So under the hood, how does this work? In Drizzle Utils, when you create a new instance, under the hood we create something called a new block stream, right? And a new block stream basically just tracks each new block that comes through. And you can also do stuff with it if you want. Once you initialize the Drizzle Utils object, it's just another RxJS stream, and you can subscribe to it, pipe it to different things, do whatever you want with it. But all these other tools basically work on top of this new block stream because they need to be notified whenever there's a new block, right? Whenever new block, call this thing, this method to get a number. Whenever new block, call this to grab the state of the contract. That's how all this works under the hood. So what's interesting is that this works even with non-WebSocket providers, because what we do is we do a polling type of thing, and we try to check the previous block number and the current block number. And if we're missing a block number, we'll actually call on those blocks as well to make sure that we never miss a block. And this is all written in RxJS, and again, it was actually only 10 lines to do everything that I just talked about right now. So highly recommend it if you can go to this particular file. It's kind of, I'm pretty proud of the code there. So you can see the power of streams right there. We also include other helpful tools, like this slide is misplaced. So this was what I wanted to talk about before, when we create the state stream, right? You pass in a truffle artifact, you create the state stream, and then we subscribe to it and you log out the whole contract state, right? So Yes.
So is it for local development or can I hook it up to like Web3 like JS and then use it for like production server?
Use it for what, sir?
For just like for the mainnet.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So it's for the mainnet. So I can observe the state even if there is no function to get the data.
Which to read the state, yes.
Okay.
From what, depending on whatever provider you put in, you can read stuff from the mainnet. But you need to have the contract artifact because you need the ASTs to decode the logs, right? That's the only thing. So this use case mostly is probably going to be used for when you're making your own dApp. If you want to read state from other people's contracts, it's possible, but you need to get their AST basically. So there is a way to like pass this in. Where if you don't want to use truffle artifacts, you can pass in like the ABI AST, and there's a way to do that. But the use case that we're trying to strive for, at least for now, is just when you're making your own dApp and you want to stream your state to the front end for usage. Cool. Yes.
And if I use this on like on the web in the browser, so you will actually go out to Ethereum blockchain and pull all the data every block.
So say that again.
So if I use this in a browser, in user's browser.
Yes, in the browser.
Does it go to mainnet, try to get every block?
Every time there's a new block, it will try to call this function and get the state.
Only the state, not the whole block.
Oh, we get the whole block from new block stream as well, right? Like here, this is the new block stream.
So my question is that would that be a huge amount of data streaming to client's machine?
Oh, but it's dependent on. That's a good question. Maybe. I haven't thought about that quite yet. But these are good questions to ask, and I definitely put that into the issues, and then we'll think about how to filter through that. All right. Yeah, but I think. Just in case there's any misunderstanding, it doesn't go and pull out all the blocks from before, right? It's just whenever there's a new block, it gets whatever's in that new block.
Yeah, but that still be like huge.
It could be, yeah, it could be. It's true. But I mean, like every 20 seconds, it depends on like what exactly you're trying to do. I suppose, like I mean, a lot of these web apps these days, they're like, I mean, it's a judgment call for sure. I agree with that. Anyway, so with get contract instance. Which is convenience function, allow you to grab the Web3 instance of the contract either through an ABI address or the artifact. Current account stream, whenever someone changes the account on MetaMask, you want to be notified so that you can change the indicators on your dApp. And then get Web3, getting Web3 from different methods, right? Because there are different ways to get Web3. So with the get Web3 custom function, what you can do is you can provide a custom provider. If you don't provide that, it's just going to default to the window.ethereum. If that's not there, it's going to look for window.web3, assuming it's because everything's in flux these days, and we really have no clue as to what the actual standard is. So that's why the provider spec is so important, so that we don't have to have to deal with any of this, right? And you can also put a fallback provider, and if you don't put anything in, it'll automatically default to the development provider, which right now is 9545 because of Truffle Develop Console. But I am aware that 8545 isn't really commonly used with Ganache and everything. But then there's also 7545, and I don't quite remember at this moment, but it's there's an active discussion about standardizing these ports, and I'm not sure if we're going to get there anytime soon because there's a lot of politics, right? It's like, why don't you come to my port number? It's a changing industry, right? It's a very early ecosystem. So everything we talked about today is supported in the browser, server side, and actually React Native. We tested it on that as well. And this is a leftover from my Japanese presentation, so I got some Japanese there. But yeah, please try it out. Usually I put QR codes so that it's easier for you to just take a picture. And but I mean, you can also spell. That works too. And that's pretty much it. We're gonna have TruffleCon August 2nd to 4th. I don't know if anyone of you have the time or the resources to go, but if you do, I have some cards over here you can come up to me and it'll actually give you a $100 discount. So that would be pretty cool. But that's pretty much it. Thank you for your time. Let me know if you have any other questions, things like that. Yes.
What happens when there are more than one users streaming on a specific contract? So let's say I stream on this contract, and the other users update, like increment the counter.
Yep.
So will that be updated on my?
Yeah. Well, you're just reading from the blockchain, right?
Yes.
So whatever happens to the contract outside of that.
Yes. So everything, every changes on the contract, then it will be
Streamed to you. Yes.
To my page. And so under the hood, there should be some port to stream from my interface to the contract, right?
No, this is all read only.
Just
So,
read only.
yeah,
So
this is all
there's
read because I think when you're doing writes, it's not so much. The streams don't help as much because you want to be more sure about what you're doing. You know, you have to approve the transaction, and it's usually when you do writes, they're more of a one-off type of thing.
Yes.
So this library is more focused on reading rather than
Just reading.
yeah. So with writing, I would recommend just using a regular Web3.js method call. Yeah, and that's fine. There's no need to create abstractions if they work fine, right?
How do you handle reorg?
So yeah, with reorg is going to be a very difficult thing, but basically that's invisible. We just keep calling it, like we don't handle it. Yeah, unfortunately, we just every time there's a new block, we just call it a new block. We just grab data from there. So if it was wrong, hopefully it would get corrected in the next block. Right? Every time there's like a next one. So yeah, but I mean, hey, nothing's perfect. All right. Oh, sure.
Can I fetch the counter only when some event just happened?
Sorry, can you say that again? Can you?
Because when you increment the counter, there will be an event.
Yes.
And so can I just fetch the counter when there is some events just happen? Not every block.
Oh, you could, yeah. You could do that. Like with, well, for example, let's say you listen to the events. Where is it? Let's say you listen to the event, right? You can pipe it to make another call to do other stuff, right? So you can like every time there's an update event, then you do I don't know whatever you want, which can include getting get count as well. So that way you don't have these these extra you can say extra calls that are unnecessary because you know that that number hasn't changed unless there was an event, right? But again, like I would hazard to say really quickly, it's really important not to over optimize because right now people can't even do anything close to this, right? In terms of the developer experience, right? And even if we're downloading, a megabyte or 2 megabytes every 20 seconds, I would argue that's still better than having no one use apps and getting zero adoption, right? Obviously, you might have to manage that by telling people, okay, don't use this if you're, if you have a bad connection or something. But I think it's important that we explore these ideas, and not always be like it's not 100% optimal. I don't want any extra calls, things like that, right? But that's my opinion, so take that with a grain of salt. So if no other questions, I think we'll just end it. And feel free to come to me, if you want $99 off TroubleCon, if you're going, or just you want to talk, just come up to me, it's fine. Thanks.
And that's the end of the event. And I think we still get some time to use this venue, so feel free to talk and have conversation. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.